The boy had never heard a single note of the world, not the wind that caressed the dunes, not the prayers that drifted through the marble halls of his father's estate. Yet on the night the new maid arrived, he heard something, not a sound, not exactly. It was a pulse, deep and ancient, rising from the stones beneath his feet, and it whispered his name. Asterisk, the desert began where the light surrendered. By day, the dunes shimmered like molten gold, rippling waves of heat that erased the horizon. By night, they turned black, vast, and silent, swallowing every sound except the pulse of the wind. And in the heart of that silence stood Alkmaar Estate, a palace carved from white stone, glinting like a mirage against the emptiness inside its walls. Wealth lived without warmth. Khalid al-Hamid, master of the estate, liked to say he had built everything he owned with his own hands. But what he truly built was distance, thick walls, empty halls, and a kingdom where silence obeyed him. The servants walked softly, the chandeliers never swayed, and even the clocks ticked as if afraid to intrude. Only his son disturbed that stillness. Amir, 17, slender and sharp-eyed, was born into silence. Deaf since birth, he'd never heard his father's voice, nor the call to prayer that echoed faintly from a distant minaret. But he saw everything, the tightening of his father's jaw, the tremor in a servant's hands, the quiver of curtains in the heat. For Amir, the world existed in vibrations, in shadows, in the way air trembled before thunder. To Khalid, that silence was a humiliation. He had married late, desperate for an heir, and when his son arrived without sound, the doctor's words turned into knives. Permanent, irreversible. He blamed no one, and yet blamed everyone. He built walls around the estate so thick that even laughter couldn't escape. They communicated through interpreters, polished women and men who translated Khalid's clipped commands into moving hands for Amir, and Amir's fluid signs into flat, emotionless Arabic words for Khalid. But words, no matter how many, never bridged the space between them. Amir learned early that his father's gaze could cut deeper than any voice. And so, the boy learned silence well, for years. The same staff moved quietly through Alkmaar's halls until, one summer, they all left without warning. No explanation, no note. Only their uniforms, folded neatly on the steps of the servants' quarters. As if the house itself had spat them out, Khalid replaced them quickly, but the estate had changed. The mirrors fogged in strange weather. Doors that once stayed open began to shut themselves. The air seemed charged, like the stillness before a storm that never came. Then one evening, a new maid arrived. She came without luggage, only a cloth bundle tied with fraying rope. Her name was Miriama, dark-skinned, tall, with eyes that seemed older than her face. She bowed low when introduced, but said little else. Khalid's house manager gave her brief instructions. You clean the east wing. You speak only when spoken to. You don't disturb the master or the boy. Miriama nodded, her face unreadable. But when she began to work, the silence changed. She didn't hum songs, not the kind with melody. What came from her throat was tone, low and strange, almost like the resonance of wind passing through hollow stone. The sound carried, even though it was soft. It vibrated in glass, in walls, in air. Amir first noticed her 3 days later, wiping dust from an old tapestry depicting the founding of Alkmaar. He watched her from the shadows of the staircase. When she moved, her rhythm was deliberate, not the practiced glide of a servant, but something deeper, like each motion was connected to something he couldn't see. Her humming thrummed faintly against his chest, though he couldn't hear it. He felt it. That night, he couldn't sleep. His room was a museum of untouched toys and textbooks, lit by the dim glow of the moon filtering through carved screens. He pressed his palm against the floor, polished marble, cold and smooth, and felt nothing. Then, faintly, a tremor. It was so subtle he almost dismissed it, but it grew, not from the walls or windows, but from below, deep within the earth. Amir sat up. His heart quickened. The vibration wasn't random. It pulsed in rhythm, slow, steady, like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. He stood and moved toward the corridor. The lights flickered. Outside, the desert wind began to rise, the faint rumble of a sandstorm. Curtains swayed like ghosts trying to breathe. He descended the main staircase barefoot. The air was thick with dust and electricity. And there, at the end of the hall, stood Miriama. She wasn't cleaning. She stood motionless, hands folded, eyes closed. Her lips were moving, but not in speech. It was that same hum again, the one he'd felt more than heard. When she opened her eyes, they locked on his. For the first time in his life, Amir felt as if someone saw him, not as broken, not as pitied, but as alive. He wanted to ask what she was doing. His hands began to move instinctively, the fluid gestures of his sign language. But she raised a hand, gently, stopping him. Then she signed something back. He froze. It wasn't standard sign language, not any dialect he knew. The movements were older, rounder, filled with shapes that suggested meaning without directly stating it. Still, he understood her. Somehow, she signed. "You feel it, don't you?" He nodded. The marble beneath his feet was trembling softly. It wasn't the storm. It was coming from inside the house, or maybe deeper. Miriam tilted her head, studying him. Her lips curved in a small, almost sad smile. Then she made another sign, slow, deliberate. "You're hearing what's been waiting." The lights flickered again. The chandeliers chimed, a faint metallic tremor that Amir felt resonate in his bones. He stumbled, disoriented, clutching the banister as the air thickened. And then, for the first time in 17 years, he heard something, not sound in the normal sense. Not through his ears, but through everything else. The world had a pulse. The marble beneath his feet sang in low frequency. The glass in the windows whispered like distant waves. His father's portrait on the wall seemed to breathe. He pressed his palms to his temples. The sensation was overwhelming, terrifying and beautiful all at once. Miriam stepped closer. She smelled faintly of sand and rain. She reached out, took his hand, and placed it over her chest. He felt the hum again, the same rhythm, now perfectly synchronized with the vibration of the floor. Her heartbeat matched the earth's. And then, it stopped. Silence, but not the absence of sound. A deep, conscious pause in the air. As though the house itself had inhaled and was waiting to exhale, the lights steadied. The sandstorm outside faded into a hiss. Miriam released his hand and stepped back. Amir's breathing slowed. His body trembled, his skin alive with a tingling energy he'd never known. He looked at her, desperate for explanation, but she only smiled. Her eyes gleamed, not with cruelty, but with knowing, the kind of knowing that frightens and comforts at once. She lifted a finger to her lips, not for silence, but for secrecy, then walked past him, her bare feet making no sound. Amir turned, watching her disappear into the east wing corridor. The faint smell of frankincense trailed behind her, blending with the dust of the storm. The marble floor beneath his feet still pulsed faintly, as if remembering. He stood there for a long time after she was gone, his reflection staring back at him in the glass doors. For the first time, he wondered if silence could be something alive, a living thing that could wait, breathe, and even whisper. By morning, the house was calm again. The storm had swept the dunes into new shapes. Khalid sat at breakfast, reading the financial papers, his gold watch ticking faintly. Amir entered silently and took his seat. The servants moved like ghosts, pouring coffee, arranging fruit. No one spoke of the storm, or the flickering lights, or the fact that every mirror in the east wing had cracked during the night. But Miriam passed by behind his father's chair, and for an instant, she glanced at Amir. Her eyes met his, steady, ancient, and she gave the smallest nod. Amir's pulse raced. He pressed his palm against the table and felt it again. The faintest vibration beneath the surface. It was waiting. He didn't know what for, or why, but he knew the silence of Alkmaar had changed forever. That night, he dreamed. He dreamed of the desert, not the lifeless expanse he'd seen from the balcony, but a living ocean of sand that breathed. Beneath the dunes, something moved, vast and slow, like a heart turning in its sleep. He dreamed of voices buried under stone, of echoes too deep to be human. And when he woke, Miriam's words pulsed through him again. "You're hearing what's been waiting." The next morning dawned sharp and colorless, as though the storm had scrubbed the desert of its warmth. Alkmaar estate gleamed under the washed-out sky, each marble tile reflecting light too bright to touch. But inside, the air still carried a pulse, faint, rhythmic, as if the house itself hadn't forgotten the tremor that passed through it the night before. Amir didn't speak of what happened. He couldn't. There were no words in any language for what he had felt, the vibration that had moved through him, the sound that wasn't sound. All morning, he wandered the hallways, trying to find it again. When his palm brushed a column, he thought he heard, or rather, felt, a low-toned whisper from the stone. But when he pressed closer, it vanished. The silence that followed was heavier than ever, almost watchful. At lunch, Colin sat opposite him, flipping through documents while his assistant translated his short, distracted commands, the usual routine. But Amir barely touched his food. He kept glancing toward the east wing corridor where Mariama had disappeared hours ago. His father noticed. "Why are you staring?" The assistant sighed sharply, her face stiff. Amir shrugged, forcing his eyes down. Khalid's gaze hardened. "That maid, the new one. She's strange. Keep your distance," the assistant translated. Then, without looking up, Khalid added aloud in Arabic, "People like her carry superstition like a disease. It infects the weak." Amir froze. He didn't respond, but something in his chest tightened. Not anger, not fear, defiance. It was small, but it was new. That evening, Miriam appeared again. She entered the music room, an ironic name for a space that had never known music, carrying a silver bowl and a cloth bundle. The sun was setting, painting the arched windows in gold and crimson. Dust floated in the air like suspended stars. Amir was already there, waiting. When she saw him, she smiled faintly and set the bowl on the floor. She gestured for him to sit. Her hands moved in shapes he didn't know, not standard sign, but something older, flowing. The gestures felt less like words and more like invocations. She pointed to the bowl and unwrapped her bundle. Inside were small objects, smooth stones, a strip of woven fabric, a feather darkened with soot. She placed each one carefully into the bowl, then tapped the rim once with her knuckle. The sound, though he couldn't hear it, spread through him like a ripple in still water. Then she began to move her hands again, slow, deliberate. Amir recognized fragments of sign language, but the rest was foreign. Her fingers drew circles, spirals, lines in the air. He watched closely, mimicking her movements, though he didn't know why. When he completed the last gesture, something inside him shifted. The air thickened. The world, tilted the silence wasn't empty anymore. It hummed, soft, alive. He could feel the walls vibrating, the glass panes resonating in a pattern his bones understood before his mind did. It wasn't frightening. It was like discovering the world had been whispering all along, and only now had he learned how to listen. Over the next days, Miriam taught him more. They met in hidden corners, the greenhouse filled with white desert lilies, the courtyard where fountains slept dry, the servant halls lined with ancient carpets. She showed him gestures she said were keys, ways of unlocking what the earth remembers. When Amir practiced them, the air would shift, sometimes faintly, sometimes enough to make the lamps flicker. Once, as his hands traced a spiral she'd shown him, the mirror beside them clouded as if exhaling, though the room was cool. Another time, he brushed his fingertips against a brass railing and nearly fell back. Whispers flooded his chest like breath, syllables made a vibration. He couldn't understand them, but they carried emotion, grief, longing, warning. Afterward, he told Miriam through signs. "The walls speak," she nodded solemnly. "They always have. You're only beginning to hear them." But their closeness didn't go unnoticed. Khalid's patience, always brittle, began to crack. He saw his son's newfound intensity, the strange stillness in his eyes. He noticed Miriam passing him in the hallways, her steps soundless, her presence too composed. And he began to hear things too, the faint hum that came from the east wing. The way doors seemed to sigh when she walked by. One night, he found them in the greenhouse. Amir's hands were moving in those alien gestures. Miriam watched with that same calm focus. For a man like Khalid, who spent a lifetime building control out of chaos, it was too much. He slammed the door open. The sound, loud, physical, startled them both. "What is this?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls. Amir jumped to his feet, his hands trembling. The interpreter, always hovering nearby, rushed forward to sign Khalid's words. But before she could finish, Khalid pushed her aside and pointed directly at Miriam. "Out," he ordered. "You don't touch my son. You don't speak to him again." Miriam didn't move. She stood, meeting his fury with an unnerving stillness. "He is changing," she said softly, in Arabic. "You should be proud." Khalid's face darkened. "He doesn't need your witchcraft." She tilted her head. "Then why does your house hum when you lie?" The words struck him silent. For a heartbeat, he looked afraid, then furious. He grabbed her arm and shoved her toward the door. "Get out before I have you dragged." Amir's body moved before his mind did. He stepped between them, hands out, eyes blazing. Khalid froze, startled. His son had never defied him before, not in 17 years. Amir sighed, sharp and clear, "No." Khalid's expression twisted. You don't understand. Amir's hands cut through the air again. She helps me here. The interpreter hesitated, unsure whether to translate. Khalid didn't need her to. He understood enough to feel the rebellion in every motion. His face hardened into stone. He turned and left the greenhouse without another word. The sound of the door slamming echoed like thunder, though for Amir, it was vibration alone. Still, it carried weight. The air between them trembled. Miriama looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then she said quietly, "He fears what you are waking." Later that night, when the house slept, she came to his room. No lamps burned, only the desert moon through the lattice windows, pale and ghostly. She sat opposite him on the floor and unwrapped her cloth bundle again. "You should know what you're opening," she said. Her voice was a whisper, but her words pulsed through him like sound. "The Ashari, my people, were keepers of the hearing beneath hearing. We believed every sound is only the surface of something deeper. Beneath it lies memory, the echo of every moment the earth has ever witnessed." Her eyes seemed to see beyond him. "Your bloodline once heard it too. Long ago, before greed drowned it out." Amir frowned, signing slowly. "My family?" "Yes," she said. "But they betrayed the voice. They used it to find oil, to tear open the desert's skin, to make the earth bleed." Her tone darkened. "The Ashari tried to silence the gift before it destroyed them all. They sealed it in your blood, in the silence you were born with. Your deafness was not punishment. It was protection." Amir's chest tightened. The words, though he could not hear them, felt like a storm beneath his skin. Protection from what? He sighed. Miriama's expression softened, almost sorrowful. From the deep voice, the memory beneath silence. It remembers everything, what your father's fathers buried. The cries of the workers who died building his empire, the desert's grief. It waits beneath you, beneath this house. She leaned closer, eyes gleaming with a strange light. And now it's waking. For a long moment, neither moved. The air felt thick, listening. Amir's gaze dropped to his hands. They were trembling. He sighed slowly. "You can stop it." Miriama shook her head. "Not stop. Guide. I can show you how to listen without losing yourself. But it will come, with or without me. When the silence breaks, it will not only bless, it will remember." He met her eyes, searching for fear, but found none. Only the calm of someone who had already seen what she spoke of. Outside, the wind picked up, a sigh through the palms, a whisper against stone. Amir pressed his palm to the floor. The vibration was stronger now, like a distant drum. Miriama stood. "You must choose," she said, "to keep your father's silence, or to listen to what's been waiting." She turned to leave. At the door, she paused and glanced back at him. "The earth has long memory, Amir. It forgets nothing, and it forgives less." Then she was gone. He sat alone in the half-light, the weight of her words sinking into him like sand. He looked at his hands, the ones that had always been instruments of expression. Now, they were keys to something larger, something ancient. He felt the house hum around him, subtle but constant, like breath beneath stone dot in that moment. He realized the silence he lived with all his life wasn't empty at all. It was crowded, filled with echoes too deep for ordinary ears to bear, and somewhere below, under marble and sand, the deep voice stirred, patient, remembering. The moon rose over the desert like a slow-burning lamp. Its pale light poured across Al-Kumar's courtyard, spilling over the fountain's dry basin and the silvered palms. The air was heavy, not with wind but with expectation. Every surface seemed to listen. Miriama had chosen this night for the ritual, the first full moon since the storm. The household slept, unaware that history itself was about to wake beneath their feet. Amir stood barefoot in the courtyard, the marble cold against his skin. He had not told his father where he was going. He didn't need to. Something in his chest had pulled him here, like an unseen hand drawing him toward a truth he'd felt all his life, but never named. Miriama stood opposite him, her black robe moving faintly with the night air, her eyes reflecting the moonlight like obsidian. Between them sat the same silver bowl she had used before, but tonight, it wasn't empty. Inside, she had placed desert sand, fragments of bone, and a small vial of oil that shimmered like liquid fire. She tapped the bowl once with her finger, and the sound, though Amir couldn't hear it, passed through him like a wave. His knees trembled. His heartbeat stuttered, and then began to synchronize with the pulse of the ground beneath him. Miriama raised her hands. Her voice, low, resonant, ancient, began to hum through the air. No words, no melody, Only vibration. Each note seemed to thrum in Amir's bones, resonating through his ribs and spine until the world itself became sound. Then she began to strike the bowl. The rhythm was slow at first. 3 beats. Pause to beats, pause, a heartbeat pattern. The vibration spread outward through the marble tiles like ripples across water. Amir knelt, placing both palms flat against the ground. He could feel the pattern. He could see it. The moonlight seemed to bend in time with the rhythm, as though light itself were responding to her song. And then something happened. A shift, small but irreversible. The silence that filled his life cracked open. Amir gasped, though no air left his lungs. His mind flooded with sensation, flashes, sounds, memories that weren't his. He saw the courtyard as it had been generations ago. Barren earth, men digging with bare hands, sweat pouring down their faces as the sun punished the ground. He felt the heat of oil fires bursting from wells, heard the scream of metal collapsing, the cries of workers swallowed by flames and sand. Their voices, hundreds, maybe thousands, screamed without sound, their agony vibrating through the ground like a trap pulse. He pressed his palms harder into the marble. The sensation grew stronger, more focused. He saw his father's face, younger, desperate, standing over a pit of burning oil, clutching contracts signed in blood and greed. He saw money, the empire rising, the mansion built on bones, the silence that followed. And through it all, he heard a voice, not Miriam's, not human at all. It came from beneath the earth, deep and layered, carrying the weight of centuries. It spoke in vibration, not words, yet the meaning carved itself directly into his mind. The silence was the price. Now the debt is due. Amir's body convulsed. He fell forward, clutching the stone floor. The bowl rattled as if alive. Miriam didn't stop. Her rhythm changed. Faster now, urgent. The vibrations climbed through his body until he felt the world tearing open inside him. He saw his mother, soft eyes, gentle smile, laughing once more, a sound he'd never known. But her laughter was overlaid with another noise, the crack of fire, the collapse of steel, the echo of suffocating cries. It was too much. The flood of sound, of memory, was unbearable. He screamed, not aloud, but within, the kind of cry that has no outlet. His body shook, his mind burning with echoes. Miriam dropped to her knees beside him, her voice steady. Her hand rested on his chest, over his heart, anchoring him. Listen, she said, her lips forming the word slowly, so he could read it. Don't run. Listen, and then everything went still. The moonlight dimmed. The courtyard shadows deepened until they pulsed with movement. The sand inside the bowl began to swirl, forming shapes, faces, bodies, hands reaching upward. They weren't ghosts in the ordinary sense. They were echoes, remnants of memory pressed into the foundation of the world. Amir stared as they coalesced into something vast, a form rising from the earth itself. Made of shadow and light, it spoke again, a voice that was not heard, but felt inside every cell of his body. We are the unheard. We built your father's fortune with our silence. Now you, the son of his silence, must speak. The entity loomed, neither malevolent nor kind, simply ancient. Amir trembled. He looked to Miriam, but she was kneeling now, her head bowed. This is what I came to show you, she said. Her voice was reverent. The truth buried beneath your father's gold. The vision shifted. He was no longer in the courtyard. He was standing in the middle of a desert well, half dug, with the sun beating down. Men shouted orders, his grandfather's voice among them, demanding more digging, more speed. The workers' hands bled. The earth cracked open, revealing a black vein of oil, thick and glistening like blood. And then the ground gave way. Screams filled the air, but no one came back up. The well collapsed, sealing them alive. The desert drank their voices. Khalid's father, terrified, swore never to speak of it again. He sealed the site, buried the names, and built an empire above their graves. And a curse began, a curse of silence upon the bloodline, so that the heirs would never hear the cries of those buried beneath their wealth. When the vision faded, Amir was lying on the marble floor, gasping though his chest made no sound. Miriam knelt beside him, her face glistening with sweat. You see now, she whispered, your father's silence was not strength. It was dead. Amir sat up slowly. The courtyard swam with light. The silver bowl glowed faintly, the sand inside still swirling like a captive storm. His hands trembled as he signed. Why show me this? Miriam's expression softened, sorrow and purpose interwoven. Because you are the first who can bear it, she said. Your silence was a shield. Now it must become a voice. He stared at her. You knew all along. She nodded. The last elder of my people sent me. I am a Shari, the last daughter of the tribe your ancestors betrayed. Our duty was to guard the hearing beneath hearing, to keep balance. But when your family broke the pact, the voice went dormant, trapped between our worlds. It needed one pure air to awaken it again. He looked at his hands. The hands that had only known silence, now alive with trembling. What happens now? He sighed. Mariama's eyes were heavy with the weight of knowledge. Now the voice remembers, and remembrance is never gentle. She looked toward the house, its white walls glowing under the moonlight. Your father built his empire upon forgotten bones. The deep voice does not forget. It will call him to account. Amir's pulse quickened. You mean it will kill him? Mariama didn't answer. Her gaze was steady, calm. It will make him hear. That night, as Amir lay in bed, he could not sleep. Every vibration in the house hummed differently now, richer, alive, filled with layers he could almost translate. The ticking of his father's watch in the next room pulsed like a countdown. The marble walls whispered fragments of memory, too faint to form words, but too insistent to ignore. Even the air seemed aware. He rose, pacing. The world vibrated with restless memory, as though waiting for something to break. Then, through the stillness, he felt a pulse from the earth, a slow, mournful rhythm that resonated in his chest. He stepped onto the balcony. The desert stretched endlessly under the moon, dunes shining like water. And faintly, beneath the silence, he heard it again, that deep hum, ancient and sorrowful. It wasn't just the land. It was everything. The wind, the stones, the stars, all remembering together. He pressed a hand to his chest, overwhelmed. I can't bear it. He signed to the empty air. From behind him, Mariama's voice came softly, almost like a memory. You can, because you must. You are both their blood and their bridge. He turned, but she wasn't there. Only her voice remained, resonating inside him. The night stretched on. The hum deepened, and somewhere in the mansion, a single crack split the wall near Khalid's study, a fine fracture that released a whisper of air. The house sighed, as though exhaling after years of holding its breath died by dawn. Amir's eyes were hollow with exhaustion, but something inside him had changed. He no longer saw the world as empty silence. Every object vibrated with meaning. Every shadow seemed alive with memory. He could feel the truth in everything now, even in his father's footsteps echoing down the hall. When Khalid entered the courtyard later that morning, he paused, frowning at the cracked tiles and the strange, lingering scent of oil and earth. He didn't know it yet, but the silence that had protected him all his life was unraveling. And somewhere below, the deep voice, the memory of the buried, waited, not for vengeance, for reckoning. The night the mansion began to tremble, the desert outside was utterly still. No wind, no sound, only the pulse of something ancient awakening beneath the marble floors of Alkmaar Estate. Khalid al-Hamid stood in his study, clutching the edge of his mahogany desk. His empire's ledgers, contracts, and golden trophies were spread before him like offerings to a god that no longer answered. The air was thick, almost liquid. The walls whispered faintly, the chandeliers above swaying as though the house itself had begun to breathe. Then, thrum, the vibration began low, deep in the foundation. Khalid froze. The sound rolled through the marble, up the columns, through the glass. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a pulse, steady, alive, deliberate, and beneath it, voices, faint at first, like wind whistling through stone, but then clearer, countless murmurs rising, weaving into one collective whisper. He couldn't understand the words, but he knew their tone, accusation. Khalid stumbled backward, clutching his chest. He looked toward the door, expecting Mariama, that dark woman who had bewitched his son, to appear. Instead, it was Amir. The boy stood in the doorway, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. His presence filled the room with an almost electric stillness. He didn't sign at first. He just stood there, silent, yet radiated something that made the air vibrate around him. Amir, Khalid said, his voice shaking. Get away from here. She's poisoned you. That woman, she's filled your head with madness. Amir took a single step forward. The floor trembled. The chandelier above shuddered. Every glass ornament in the room began to hum, faintly at first, then louder. I said leave. Khalid shouted, but even his voice seemed swallowed, devoured by the sound building around his son. Amir's lips parted, but no sound came, only resonance. It was as if the air itself bent around him, vibrating with tones too low for human ears, but strong enough to make the walls ripple. And through that trembling air, his hands began to move. They want you to listen. The words weren't spoken aloud, but Khalid heard them, not through his ears, but through the marrow of his bones. The study lights flickered. Books toppled from shelves, and from the cracks in the marble, faint streams of black sand rose and drifted like smoke. The memory of the buried surfacing at last. Khalid backed away, eyes wide. No, you don't understand. I gave them work. I gave them purpose. It was the wells. The wells collapsed, not me. But the voices in the air didn't care for excuses. They swelled, overlapping, whispering in languages long dead. The oil painting of his late wife on the wall seemed to shimmer, her painted eyes glistening as if with tears. Miriama entered then, her robe trailing like shadow. She said nothing. Her face was calm, sorrowful, inevitable. Khalid turned to her, desperate. You did this. You've brought devils into my house. Miriama shook her head slowly. No, Khalid, you did. I only opened the door you've spent your life pretending didn't exist. The words struck him harder than any blow. He looked to Amir again, his only son, the child he had loved through discipline, through silence, through shame. For the first time, Khalid saw that silence was not emptiness, it was distance. A wall he had built, brick by brick, around his own guilt. The mansion trembled again, stronger. The chandeliers swung like pendulums. The desk cracked down the center. Amir raised his hands, and the air pulsed with power. A sound emerged now, faint but growing, a low, resonant hum like thunder rolling underwater. The walls began to sing. Khalid fell to his knees. Stop it, he begged, voice breaking. Please, whatever you're doing, stop. But the sound wasn't Amir's alone anymore. The entire house was joining him, the stones, the glass, the steel beams deep in the foundation. Each vibrated in harmony, each carrying the memory of the buried men. The voices of the workers rose, the ones who had died in the collapse, the ones whose cries had been buried under oil and sand. Khalid clutched his head. Their whispers pierced through him, 1,000 tones of pain and grief. He saw their faces now, men with blistered hands, mouths full of dust, eyes wide with terror as the ground swallowed them. He screamed. I didn't mean for it to happen. But the voices didn't answer. They only grew louder. A storm of remembrance that rattled the chandeliers until crystal shards rained to the floor. Miriama stood still, her voice a thread through the chaos. This is the gift of reckoning, she said softly. The hearing beneath hearing. The sound your soul has fled from all its life. Khalid turned to her, trembling. Please, make it stop. I can't. Amir stepped closer, his expression both sorrowful and resolute. He sighed once more, his movements glowing faintly with light. You have to hear them, Father. It's the only way to be free. Khalid shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I can't bear it. But the sound only deepened. It filled him. The hum in the air became a roar inside his mind, 1,000 overlapping truths. He saw his empire burning, his towers collapsing into the sand. He saw his son's life, all the times Amir had reached for him, and all the times he had turned away. The guilt tore through him like fire. His knees buckled. Miriama knelt beside him, laying a hand on his trembling shoulder. Let it in, she whispered. It's not punishment, it's remembering. And then, something broke. Khalid's scream was silent. His eyes went wide, then softened. His breath steadied. The sound that had filled the house slowed, deepened, not gone, but transformed. It was no longer a roar of accusation. It was a hum of release. The lights flickered once more and went still. Khalid collapsed forward onto the marble, his face resting against the floor. A faint smile touched his lips, peaceful, almost childlike. He was gone, the air still. The vibration faded. The mansion exhaled. Miriama bowed her head. Amir stood motionless, the aftershocks of resonance still flowing through him. His whole body trembled, but not from fear, from knowing. He could still hear, not as others did, but in the deep way only he could now. He heard the world's pulse, slow and steady, the breath of the earth, the sigh of the wind through the dunes, the quiet murmur of forgiveness. The walls no longer hummed with torment. The voices had gone silent, their memory laid to rest. Amir looked at his father's still form, tears sliding down his face. He knelt, touching the old man's hand. It was cold, but at peace. He signed a single word. Listen. The silence that followed was sacred. By dawn, the desert winds had calmed. The sun rose over Alkmaar estate, painting the white marble gold. The storm of the night before had left traces of black sand scattered across the courtyard. Like ashes from a forgotten fire, Miriam and Amir stood at the threshold of the house, facing the horizon. Behind them, the mansion was quiet, not empty, but alive with stillness. Miriam turned to him, her eyes soft. "It's done," she said. "The voice is free. The debt is paid." Amir looked out over the desert, his chest rising with the rhythm of the earth. He could feel everything now, every shift of air, every heartbeat of the world beneath his feet. He was no longer deaf, but neither was he like anyone else. He could hear truth. When the wind brushed the dunes, he heard it carry the laughter of his mother, the sigh of the buried, the murmur of his father's final piece. And beneath it all, the soft hum of the Ashari song, the heartbeat of the desert itself. Miriam stepped closer. "What will you do now?" He smiled faintly, hands still trembling from the power that lingered. "I'll listen," he sighed. For all that was never heard, Miriam nodded. "Then you'll never be alone." The sun crested higher. Its light struck the marble columns, making them gleam like new ivory. The estate no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like something beginning. Amir turned one last time toward the house. The silence inside was vast, but not empty. It was full of everything that had ever mattered. As he stepped into the desert beside Miriam, the wind rose gently, circling them, carrying grains of black sand that shimmered in the sun. And for a brief moment, Amir could swear he heard voices within it, not sorrowful this time, but grateful. They faded into the horizon. He paused, gazing across the endless expanse of dunes. The line between sky and earth blurred into light. He closed his eyes, and what he heard then was neither sound nor silence, but the memory of both, a truth that belonged to everything that had ever lived. Silence had never been the absence of sound, he thought. It was the memory of it, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. The desert wind whispered once more, low and tender, like a sigh of relief. And then there was peace.